All right, welcome back to Pave the Way podcast. I'm your host, Greg Helbeck, and today I have a very special interview with Gabe DaSilva from my old neck of the woods, the Northeast. So it's pretty cool to have Gabe on the show. I actually originally heard about Gabe on a Bigger Pockets interview, and he was doing some really cool stuff, and he wasn't too far away from me. So I'm glad we connected, Gabe, and I'm really happy that you're on the show.
Same here, brother. I'm excited.
Awesome, man. So listen, if people are not too familiar with you, would you mind giving a little bit about your background, kind of what you did before you got into, your current business, and then explain kind of your current business, what you're doing today?
Yeah, sure. So my background's in finance. I've got a bunch of finance degrees. I'm a bachelor's, a master's, and an MBA in real estate finance. And at the time, I was doing it because I was trading mortgage-backed securities. I'd had every job you could imagine in investment banking and financial services and corporate finance. I bounced around a bunch, and by no fault of my own, the market just kept cutting me. So I said, you know what? I need to be a master of my own destiny. I can't be dependent on the market and its whims. And being this big swinging dick on Wall Street, that whole dream, it's all fluff, man. There's nothing to that. So I quickly realized, no, not as quickly as I would have liked. I eventually realized it wasn't for me. And I set out to do my own thing. And my first foray into entrepreneurship was with a restaurant. I did that for a few years. I'm one of those entrepreneurs that is, it doesn't matter what the vehicle is. It's the business that excites me. So at the time it was the business of food. We did that for a few years, sold that, and transitioned into real estate. And that's where I find myself today. 5 years. I just realized it was 5 years last month in real estate investing. And, we could talk more about what that looks like today, but yeah, that's a quick 1 minute.
Totally. So you're a finance guy. So I'm assuming the transition from finance and Wall Street. So before we get into the whole real estate thing, what you were trading, what exactly were you doing? Like kind of like in the corporate world, like, high level stuff, just so this is kind of selfish question for me. What exactly were you trading, equities, or were you doing bonds?
We were doing mortgage-backed securities. So we were on the buy side. We were buying the paper from the originator. So, when they write loans, they don't want to keep them on their books for more than a week. So what they all do is essentially sell into the secondary market. I was on the buy desk. We were buying a bunch of people's, at the time, we later came to find out, shitty notes. So we were buying bad loans. Not all, but a lot of them were. And that's why what happened back then, 07, 08. So yeah, we were on the buy side. We would buy loans from smaller originators. We would pool them all together, create a security, and ultimately sell that to pension funds, endowments, and just pass the buck. That's really the name of the game in the secondary mortgage market.
Interesting. So were these single family home loans, or were they commercial loans? They kind of everything packaged together?
They were all single fams. They were at the time we would look at a pool of, I struggle to remember. I want to say we would look at like a pool of 1,000 notes, 1,000 loans, and we would kick 4, 8. Like out of that many loans, to think that only that many were bad is just silly, right? We came to find out later that a lot more than that were bad. Those were the ones that when we would go to package the security and sell it into the secondary market, they would say, we don't want that crap. So we would keep those on the books. And the company I then worked for, ultimately, that was its undoing. They kept so many of the bad loans that we bought on the books, and those stopped performing, and in turn, everything collapsed around us. So I think it was a desk of 4 guys that specialized in that product, that scratch and dent, that like subprime product. Those 4 guys took down what was at the time, I think, a team of like 250 traders, and ultimately a bank. I think there was maybe like 12,000 people at the bank. It's all gone now.
Oh my God.
That's how it went down.
So you did that. You jumped in the entrepreneur game after you did the corporate thing. I'm assuming the corporate life got old pretty quick. Besides the whole, probably making good money, but you're like, you have to go to work every day. You're working for someone else, unlimited. You don't have a lot of control. So how did you jump into real estate? Because we're going to get into your strategy on the show, but like, how did you initially get your foot in the door? Because I think that's a big issue. A lot of people maybe listening to this show, or just new investors in general, it's hard for them to get their foot in the door, because they don't have the experience. You know, it's new and it's scary. So what did you do to kind of get in the door? And then we'll talk about kind of what your business looks like today.
Yeah, sure. So my background is such that aside from the finance stuff that we've talked about, I grew up in and around real estate. So not in the capacity that we're in now, or that most of the listeners are likely in or aspiring to be in, not in that capacity, but my dad was a builder. So I grew up around blueprints and construction sites. And that's where I spent my summers and helping him out on job sites and things like that. And although his intention was never for me to do this full time, it's amazing what you'll internalize as a kid, and subconsciously you pick up so much. And that's what I came to realize that I was doing later on. And so when I finally decided, hey, this is a new vehicle for me. I like I said, I'm an entrepreneur through and through. I love business. It could be widgets. It could be blowing glass. It could be neckties. It doesn't matter. Actually, I hate neckties, but because of what they stand for. But but anyway, it's real estate. So I just when I transitioned into real estate, I had that. So I don't want to lie to the listener and say that I didn't have that background, because I did. I didn't know I had it though. Just like they may very well not know that they have some sort of valuable insight, experience, something they could draw on. So I didn't have that awareness then. So I got into the business, not even realizing that was going to be an asset for me. And then later it plays out in my story. I could share a little bit of that. But at first I did it the hard way, man. I went to networking events. I shook hands. I was reading. I was listening to podcasts. I was just consuming. I'm a voracious reader. So I'm constantly consuming. I love the podcast, the audio book. It's just, and so, and I'm a big believer, and that's the hat, right? We were talking about offline before, like the Tony Robbins thing of turning decades into days. So I will just spend, hours consuming a book on someone's life. In 8 hours of audio, you could learn what someone took an entire year to amass, an entire lifetime to amass in the way of knowledge. And so that's where it all started for me, and just being very diligent about that, and just constantly just consume, but then execute too. Like, don't just become one of those guys that's just like constantly going to these events and just like, you think you're a real estate investor because you're going to real estate investor networking events. Like, you're not an investor until you buy something. So yeah, I'll throw that out there and make that distinction. But that's the kickstart essentially.
That's awesome, man. I'm the same exact way. I am constantly feeding my mind with stuff. And it's so funny you mentioned like books and podcasts. It's condensed knowledge. It's like taking, like you said, I mean, I'm reading a book right now on how to do the BRRRR strategy on rental properties, because that's something I need to work on. I'm going to take a book that a guy wrote who has a bunch of them. He takes his best ideas, puts them in a book, packages them up, and now I got a blueprint to follow. It's like I think people think it's more complicated than it is. It's really about getting your mind right, getting the right, strategy, understanding you're going to have to pivot and adjust, and then just executing every day and then tracking your numbers. It's like, it's not that complicated, It's not easy, but it's totally doable. So what was your first deal looking like? Like, because you're not wholesaling really as much as you're rehabbing, or at least you weren't when I listened to your old podcast. So what did your first deal look like? And then we'll transition into kind of how you're separating yourself from your competitors by doing some more unique renovations.
Yeah. So the first deal found me by virtue of something that I had done at one of those networking events. So just what I did was, as I was attending those events month after month, well, at one time it was 3 nights a week. It was just, I was all in, just like I do anything else. But I was going to these events, and I just said, each month after month, let me not sit at this table with the same group of people, although it likely won't be the same group. But I said, if it ever is, I don't want someone to be sitting across the table from me listening to the same story. I want to be able to tell them something different. What did I do between last time you saw me and this time? Did I go get my real estate license? Did I take the test? Did I write 6 offers? Did I make 100 calls? Whatever the case was. So each month after month, even though I wasn't doing anything that you and I would identify as like profitable or tactical per se, where we are in our businesses now, right? But back then I was just like, all right, well, I did this. So I started positioning myself as a guy who was taking action. I wasn't seeing results necessarily, but I was taking action. And so anyway, they had said, well, why don't you tell us about what you're doing in front of the group? And so I got out of my comfort zone, spoke on what I had been doing and what was and wasn't working for me at the time. And just by virtue of doing that in front of the group and sharing, a deal found me. And that's so amazing. that was my first deal. Someone came to me after I spoke and said, it sounds like you're good with heavy construction. You have this understanding of contractors and this and that. And all I knew was like the stuff I had, heard or seen my dad do or reading blueprints. But I was able to position myself as such. I knew more than most people in the room about construction. So there it was. And so anyway, the deal finds me. I go on to borrow hard money, buy it, fixed it, flipped it. I was in and out 6 months. I think I did it with like $65K out of my 401k. I netted something like 85 on it, and that was it. And on to the races.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's that first one. You get it, and you're like, oh my God, it's proof of concept. It actually works. Because it's so funny. You can totally relate to this. You see everyone else doing it in the beginning, like all these guys on the internet or in person, they're making money in real estate, and you're like, they're doing it, like, but can I do it? Like, is it for me? Because you're so new. And then you do it, you make money, and it's not from a job, and you go, oh my God, okay, this is real. Like, this came from providing value in the market and solving a problem, and I just got paid for my value, not for my time. And then it's off to the races, man. So I love how you shared that story. So let's kind of get in now to how what does your strategy look like, where you're doing a lot of, I would say more complex rehabs than the average, 3-bed, 2-bath. So what are you doing in your market to really stand out by doing, what is it, pop-top renovations? I don't know what it's called, but at a level. So can you just kind of cover that? Because you're really good at that. And that's like, I want to make that the theme of this podcast, because it'll really open up a lot of more advanced listeners, kind of their eyes to doing different things, maybe paying more for properties because you can add the value by the square footage. So I'll let you take over because you're the expert.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. Like that was our niche. We quickly realized that because we had that construction savvy, which a lot of investors don't, that was our, and there's barriers to entry, right? To do pop tops or ADA levels. If you have the construction savvy, if you're a contractor, a GC, you may know how to do them, but you're likely not going to have the resources to raise that kind of capital. And if you're a capital guy, you're well capitalized, you've got money, you may not, you likely don't understand the construction. So it'd be intimidating. So you don't necessarily do that. Well, we were fortunate to have both through our hard money partners, those relationships that we had founded by going to networking events and saying what we do and do what we say and put ourselves in front of people and modeling deals the right way and not being tire kickers, all that stuff. Yeah. And then the construction knowledge, I had some, like I said, to get going, but I was able to kind of leverage what I did have by just studying, man, and just really going out there, asking a lot of questions. My framer would say, he's like, dude, you asked so many questions. He's like, are you trying to, like, I'll be out of a job soon if I keep answering all these questions. And I was like, no, trust me. I only want to understand like how long it should take and how much it should cost and make sure I'm not getting ripped off. Yeah. Other than that, like, I don't want to swing hammer. I want to be the guy, I want to be the overseer of the swingers of the hammers, right? That's not what you say to them, but this is how you position it in your own mind. So anyway, that's how we identified our core competency. Like, what's the niche in the market that we can kind of, like that whole concept of go narrow and deep. Well, that's what we did. We just saw that opportunity to force appreciation and add value to properties that would otherwise go, like a cosmetic rehab might have yielded 20, 30K. Well, maybe, right? If everything goes right. What we saw was we may have to take on a little more risk and be there longer, but we can model in 6 figures. And why not do that? Because we also don't have to compete as heavily on the front end to buy the property, whereas anybody else can afford to pay you, say, 200 for it, or in my market, that's pretty common to pay 200 to get in on a project. We can afford to pay we won't pay 250, but we could pay that much more because we know we're going to put a second floor on it. We're going to double the square footage. We're going to reface the entire house. We're going to finish the basement, and the outsale price warrants us paying a little bit more on the front end, which those margins have gotten squeezed over time because those investors I was talking about earlier on, the GC who does this for a living, he's gotten wind of this, and then the doctor, dentist, the guy that makes good money, he's also gotten wind of it. And what we find is that those two guys have found each other, and now they're your competition. They're bidding alongside you at auction. They're doing the project up the street, and they can pay more because they've got that mindset. So long as I learn, it was worth it. Or whatever the case is, or the guy will gift his labor on the GC side. Stuff like that is making it a little bit more challenging in our market to find those opportunities. But what I'm talking about now to a lot of listeners might be, this is the first time people hear about this. And it's like, if this is new to you, it's likely not being done in your market. Go do it. Be first to market. That's what I say, because knock the table over. That's what I say now, because if we had done this 7 years ago, when the opportunities were there, you could pick these deals off MLS. They were there, and it was that easy. And in a lot of markets around the country, that's still the case. Here, that's no longer the case. Here, we really do have to work for every opportunity. Yeah. So, a little long-winded, but I really get excited about it.
It's very interesting. We've got a lot to talk about here. So what was your typical, so we're going to get into the risks on this. So what was your typical, walk me through, we'll get into your best deal in a little bit, but let's walk me through a traditional deal on how you would, acquire a property, do your special, we'll call it the Gabe renovation, and then exit, we'll exit the property. So just kind of walk the listeners through how that would look. Cause I think a lot of people, they're going to hear your example and then be like, oh, I get it. That's what that's how we stand out from the competition. Yeah.
So I'll break it down. So the same way I do it here locally, whenever we host a course or an event or whatever, it's the find, fund, fix, flip. The 4 Fs, they apply to any fix and flip project. For us, when it comes to the find component, this is what everybody struggles with here and nationally. Anybody that I talk to that's in another market trying to figure out, can I do this here? Well, the one way to check, to identify if your market is good for this, look for a dated cape, ranch, a bungalow, something that if you were to double the square footage, you would get 2.5 times on the outsale. So if you could buy a dated 1960s cape for $200,000, you're looking for a colonial. It's an 800 square foot cape. You could buy it for 200. You're looking for a colonial twice that size, 16 to 1800 feet, because there's ways to add square footage during the construction above and beyond just going up. That sells at 5. So if you can find that 2.5 times multiple in your market is likely a good one for this model. Then it becomes about identifying specific opportunities in that market. And we could go on for days about that. Do you cold call? Do you direct mail? Do you door knock? Do you all that stuff? So you're looking for dated capes, ranches, bungalows that you can blow the roof off, double the square footage, force appreciation, and sell for 2.5 times or somewhere thereabouts. That's the fine piece. The funding component, these are heavy lifts, these projects. So it's about partnering with the right lender, a lender who's got somebody on their team that understands construction and will look at your scope and say, okay, I see what they're doing here, because we've got a lending partner now who's treating our projects as new construction. And we're going through this process with them where we're educating them on why it's not. It's just, it isn't. We're saving the foundation. We're saving the outside 4 walls. We're saving the first floor deck. So anyway, finding a good lending partner who kind of understands construction and has an appetite for that. That's the fun piece. On the fixed piece, again, that's something that we've continued to dial in. I took the very systematic and scalable approach to running a business that comes from food, the food service industry experience. And I applied that to construction, which doesn't. Everything in construction, they shoot from the hip. They're like pulling shit out of their tool belt. Yeah. And it's like making stuff up as they go along. Yeah. Well, we have processes, we have systems, we've got orders of operation. We track the trades, who's coming in, when are they going out? When's the next trade come in behind them? So it's really about running your rehabs tight, just tight in the way of budget, which is what everybody always talks about. And, there's a million guys online telling you about how to do a scope of work and a budget for your rehab. But I believe more so than that even is the timeline. The budget is important. So important. Look what's happening with tariffs now. Our cabinet costs, because we own the supply company as well. We feed our own renovation company through our supply company. So I'm watching cabinets shoot up 22%. I'm watching vinyl siding shoot up 16%, lumber up 12%. It's actually on the way back down now, but all these things are going up. And it's like, all right, well, I can't control a lot of that stuff. So it's good to understand it, but I can't control it. What I can control is, are those guys at the job site every morning? Like that I can do by literally just driving by. And if they're not there, crawl up their ass, start sending text messages. Like at the beginning, that was literally me in the field checking. So anyway, we drive a process, and our our motto in the field is no lost days. Not a single day goes by where something isn't done. Like that whole theory on get 1% better every day. Yep. We got to move 1% closer to completion every day. That's it. Yep. And then on the flip side, the sell, I mean, I used to do it all myself. What I found is if you can get a really good realtor partner who understands how to pre-sell a property, that's your best bet. I spent a lot of time and energy and effort and dollars just trying to run all those myself at the beginning. And a listener who's new and just starting this, you're going to wear all 4 hats I just talked about and just do it. You have no choice. But as the resources start to come in, as the flips start to generate you some revenue, you start looking to fire yourself in each one of those roles. Always and ever be firing yourself, delegate and elevate. And so I found a really, really good realtor partner who happens to be my girlfriend. So it works out really, really well. Awesome. But she really runs point on the sell piece, on the flip piece. Once we get the house under contract on the buy side, we are already selling that house. We're selling the dream. We're selling what's going to be there. We've got renderings, floor plans. We've got a spec sheet of what's going to go in there. So people lack vision. A lot of people lack vision. So the only way to get them to really see it in their mind's eye is you have to paint the picture as crystal clear as you can. Show them houses you've done in the past. Show them the brand of Kohler. What model Kohler fixture are they getting in the master shower? Like you got to get that deep. Not like super early on. There's a whole nother reason why you don't do that. But so that's how we pre-sell. That's how we flip our properties. We'll pre-sell probably 50% of our projects in any given year using this model. That's
amazing, man. I like how it's like a system. You know what I mean? You got that system down with those 4 pillars. So that's awesome. And you're standing out now because this is something I really like about your model. What really attracted me to get you on the show is, there's a really good book called Confessions of a Real Estate Entrepreneur by Jim Randall. If you haven't read it, I'd check it out if I were you. It's a great book. And he has a whole chapter on basically changing the paradigm of a property. So, buy the property on one pricing model and then sell it on another pricing model. You're going to make a lot of money. So basically you're buying a Cape Cod, a 3.2 Cape Cod, on what a 3.2 Cape Cod is worth, trying to get it at a discount, and you're adding value, forcing appreciation by selling it as a 5.3 or a 6.3 or whatever, and whatever that house would be. Is that still a Cape Cod? Are you going to keep a Cape, or do you turn a Cape into a colonial? Because that's a question I have, because like when you're adding that much square footage, it's like it's kind of like a quasi rehab development deal. So like, what are you keeping the properties the same, or are they different style houses? Like, what are you doing because of that? Because that's interesting. It's very interesting.
Yeah, the finished product is always different. The finished product is a colonial. No matter what we start with, we wind up with a big blown out colonial, open floor plan, all the bedrooms upstairs, sometimes in-law suite on the first floor. If it's like what you're saying, if it's a really big 3-bed, 2-bath Cape with a 2-car garage, by the time we're done, it'll be a 5.4 with an in-law suite and a full bath on the first floor, 4 bedrooms upstairs, 2 bathrooms. So the footprint of the house changes. The footprint, I should say, the building envelope doesn't change. The footprint, the floor plan changes, but the building envelope stays the same. That's the whole difference that's how we differentiate between new construction and add-a levels or pop tops. We keep the floor plan. I'll throw air quotes up there. Yeah. Floor plan, but the building envelope stays the same, and we try and go up. And yeah, so short answer, it's a colonial when it's done.
Yeah, you're changing it. That's awesome. You're buying a Cape Cod, turning it into a colonial, and making the spread in the middle. So before we get into how you're vertically integrated, when it comes to dealing with, because you're in the Bergen County area, right? Like North New Jersey, that's your market?
Yeah. Union County, Bergen County, Essex County. So yeah, it's North Central Jersey.
North Central Jersey. So you're dealing with different towns and municipalities. How big of a pain in the ass is it for you? I mean, I'm sure it differs by, municipality, but to get the building permits you need to do, because you're not doing a new construction deal but you're adding bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage. Like, is that process a pain in the butt? Is that some of the risks and the downsides with this, or is that process much more easier than people probably assume?
So it's easier in the sense that it's systematic. And so towns all have their own way of doing things, but for the most part, they each have a process. And so if you align with their process, you're going to make friends and you're going to get things done. If you drive the process yourself at the beginning, everybody should. To an extent, I still do. I'm now a licensed GC, so I fill out all my own permits. I apply for everything in my own name, in the name of my LLC, no longer my own personal name. At the beginning, you have to do it yourself, apply for it in your own name, do the renovation yourself. On paper anyway, you're going to hire the team of trades to do it. But what I found is if you pay attention to, well, for one, it's people at the end of the day. Behind the desk is a person. If you align with whoever that person is at the zoning office or the construction official's office, and you work through the process the way they want you to work through it, don't try and impose your will on them. Work with what they give you, and you're going to make friends and you're going to get stuff done. We've got it. We can get permits approved in a town where we are super active, where we've done probably 10 or 12 of these. We can get permits in 2 weeks on an ADA level. That's sick fast. That's unheard of. In towns where we're not aligned with them, where we are new, and they don't know us and they don't trust us and they don't have a reason to like us yet, it could take 2 months. And so we bake that all in. We make sure we know what we're looking at from a holding cost standpoint. But what I would say is it's just, at the end of the day, it's just systems and figuring out what towns want what in which order, and just give them what they want. And if you give them what they want, when they have questions, answer the questions. If you don't know the answers, partner with a guy who does. Find either someone who's done these style projects in your market, or get a really good GC, like a guy who shows up with everything. Like he gives you the jacket filled out, not sitting there on the hood of the truck doing it and asking you how many bedrooms again, like how many square feet is this house? Like I sent you the plans 2 weeks ago. Like you're supposed to have bid this project. Do you tell me you didn't even look at the plans?
Yeah, right.
So,
you have to take a check. That's amazing.
Yep.
Awesome. So, and before we get into, so are you doing this permit stuff after you close? Or are you doing this when you're in contract to try to cover your ass in case you run into trouble? Like, are you putting a contingency in here? Or are you taking the deal down, owning it, and then going to get permits? So now you have to start paying on the property.
We do everything in parallel. So as soon as my offer is accepted on the house, I've already done some preliminary research with regard to zoning. If I'm in a town I know, then there isn't really much else to do because I've done enough there that I know. If it's a new town, I've already been to the zoning office and I've already talked in theory about, could I do this if I were to buy a house that looked like that? And so I've got a good handle on it. And once we know that, we could start applying for permits. Not necessarily applying. Some towns will let you apply once you have equitable interest in the form of a contract. You can apply for the permits. In other towns, you can't apply till you close and take possession. So our goal is the day we close to go right from the closing table to the town and submit our permits. Does that ever happen? No. I can probably, honestly say that's happened 4 or 5 times. But in some towns we've been able to submit before we took possession. So the day we closed, we were already in there doing demo, So the short answer is do that in parallel. Always act as if. That's like the whole theory. Act as if.
Act as if, even though
I'm acting like I own it already before I own it. And so we get cracking on everything early. I've got the stamps ready. I've got the preliminary architecturals, the survey, all that stuff's ready to go. Just need to hand it in.
That's awesome, man. I did the same thing on a rehab I'm doing right now. Like it was in contract and people thought I owned it already. And then I closed and I was like, oh, by the way, I actually own this now. So it's really mine stuff. That's funny. So before we get into some of the best deal stuff, I want you to talk a little bit about how, this is another thing that's very unique about you. You're vertically integrated in this real estate business. And it's something a lot of people don't really talk about. So, kind of explain how you're vertically integrated because, you rehab for a living and now you own a supply company, which goes hand in hand with the rehab company. So, what made you do that? I mean, it's pretty obvious, but like kind of what made you do that and how did you start that? Because it's very, very unique and it's smart because now you're getting your stuff at costs and you have another company that spun off something you already needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we were trying to think about it like we are our own customer. So what customer base do you know best? Well, if you are the customer, then you know yourself best. In theory, you should. So we just started thinking like, all right, well, I was going to builders conventions and shows and trying to learn a little bit more about materials and things to help with the budget on the rehabs. Yeah. And as I'm there, I'm realizing like I need to take my contractor hat off and put my supply hat on, because these guys are there. The manufacturers are there catering to two types of people: builders who will buy their products in the end, the end user, but the guy who's going to get the product from the manufacturing facility in the Midwest all the way out to the East Coast. And so I wanted to be that guy. And so I started thinking along those lines, and I've come to understand how that whole model works now. And it's super drawn out, and there's a lot of people making money on you long before you buy a product. I guess what ultimately tipped the scales was we were looking at hardy board for a project, and we had just like ticked over the 800K mark on our first big project back then. And we needed to, and I didn't know much about it. So I was getting an education on the product, then talking about what does the product cost at a show. And the guy at the booth said, you know what, hang on, let me see if I can find your rep. And so he walked around in circles for a while, and there was no rep from the Northeast to be found. And so he wouldn't talk to me, and he had an accent. He was from the South. And I was like, well, I don't understand why you can't just tell me. Like, I just want to understand what this is going to cost versus vinyl, which is what I'm used to working with. And the guy just flat out, like, I badgered him, and I wouldn't let him go to lunch. I don't know what the hell he wanted to do, but he wanted to get out of there, and I wouldn't let him. And he just said, listen, I'm just going to be honest. We just gouge you up there. And I was like, you what? And he's like, yeah. He's like, up by you? He's like, we can, so we do. And and that was that. And I just walked away shaking my head thinking, like, does that mean that other places in the country, because I later found out that people are putting hardy on 350 homes in Texas. And I said, how can they afford to do that in other markets when we can't justify it unless the house is 8 or 850 and up? Well, then I started looking, and I did a lot more research, and I came to realize that that's the case with a lot of things. So where we started opening up dealer accounts, cabinets, hardware, plumbing fixtures, appliances, things like that. And so we have a little bit of extra square footage in our warehouse. And now we have a supply company entrance, and we are dealers for a handful of things. Our core competency is still the fix and flip business, like the operations division, still building, finding, funding, fixing, and flipping homes, but we supply ourselves and through our supply company. And we also figured that if we're going to do that, and some have quotas, right? So I need to hit 50,000 a year in cabinets with my cabinet supplier. Otherwise I can't have a dealer account. So I started to realize at first I wasn't going to do that kind of volume. So I put it out to our cooperative of local builders, investors, developers, designers, people who were struggling with the same things, who had the same issues, same gripes, same complaints. And so we sell internally to some of those folks as well. Less and less now, because we've started to do enough volume where we don't necessarily need to. And that becomes another business. You have to be really, self-aware and say, is this highest and best use? Do I want to put resources there? Do I want to put my team on that? Or should we be looking for new deals? And so, ever and always, deals drive the machine. But like you said, we are vertically integrated. We are doing that. We're doing appliances and cabinets and bathtubs and doors and hardware and trim and tile and a handful of other things. So my build costs in the end are significantly lower than most other guys. And so there's another competitive advantage that came as a result of something different, that's
awesome, man. I really like how you're doing that. Now you can, in theory, you could pay more because the rehab is going to be less because you're the one who's not making the margin because it's your supply company. It's really, really smart, savvy way to do business, man. And that's why I'm glad you're on this podcast. So as we start to wrap the show up, I always like to talk about, with the deals that you're doing, they're very high-end stuff. I'm from that area. I live in San Diego now, so it's the same deal out here. What's the best deal you've done? Like, let's walk it from start to finish. We'll get into, how you found the deal, what you did to add value, what the margins look like. Because I think when people hear this stuff, they're like, wow, like this is totally possible. And like, this is a model that could potentially work for me. So let's hear your best deal ever.
Yeah, awesome. So I don't have my notes in front of me. I had it all worked out so we could talk through it, but you don't forget your best deal. You definitely remember your best deal. So, and here's why it was the best deal. We've done bigger deals since, but because of where I was in my journey and what we were doing as a business, this deal mattered a lot. And so the way I look at it, and I feel like our business has kind of grown, and I try and, like we were talking about before, about turning decades into days, and I'm trying to steepen the learning curve and take big jumps if we can. And so our biggest jump at the beginning was understanding leverage and how you can borrow other people's money, and you could do more with less. And so anyway, that's how you get from doing one rehab with your own money to doing 3 to 5 with borrowed money, and ultimately, significantly more than that. The second like tick up for us was this deal. And so it was a big cape on an oversized lot in a town where demand was high, proximity to Manhattan, the direct train line, all those things working in its favor. And so the guy that had sold it to me, a wholesaler who flipped it to me, his intention was to just do a cosmetic rehab there. And I don't know what he stood to net, 40 or 50K, if everything went according to plan. And so what I thought about when I went and drove the area was at the end of the block, there was a cul-de-sac with 3 new construction homes by like the preferred builder in that town. And I'm looking at his product. I hadn't built anything that nice to date or that big, but I was like, why can't I build that? There's no reason that I can't build that and compete, because I had the big footprint for the house that we were buying. So anyway, we took the house, and against everybody's recommendations, our lender included, was like, you're really stretching on this one. But I said, if those new constructions are bringing 1.3, why can't we build a house that brings close to that? Even if not exactly that number, I know we can get close because we'll have the same footprint, we'll have the same square footage, and it'll all be new from the foundation up. No one will know the difference. We're going to present it as new. We're going to do the whole outside, the whole inside, everything. So we paid $465 for the house. And the original budgeted renovation cost was somewhere in like the $225 range, might have been even shy of that. And that would have been for a traditional add a level. But we decided to go out and up. It was the first time we had ever done an addition and added square footage out and then up again. Well, that added square footage where we decided to put it was behind the kitchen. We did a 300 square foot addition to the back of the kitchen. And then up over that became the new master suite. That was another 300 square feet. So 600 square feet added to what was, I think, a 1,200 square foot house with a finished basement. All in, we wound up with 4,300 feet on this house.
Wow.
The kitchen was 550 square feet, 2 islands. It was just a massive, it was overbuilt comparatively to anything else I had ever done, but not that street, not that market. So we put our product online and went toe to toe with him on his $1.3 million new constructions at 1.3. And we ultimately sold for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.89. We got a buyer who liked to have fun.
That's
so,
that's
and
great.
their down payment was 111. So they were big. They were big on numbers, but
yeah.
So it was a monster deal. It was the deal. It was like a tick up for us from where we were beforehand doing Cape Ada levels, just doubling the square footage and making 6-figure spreads. And, you model 6, but you always make 84, 92, 78, and you're never disappointed in that, but you never make the 101 that you model. I'll just be honest and transparent in that regard. We have, but that's not the way it always works out.
Totally,
but this deal, we'd modeled something like 250. And I think we did like 220 something on the deal.
That's
amazing. It was a monster deal. And our lender crushed it as well. And I was happy to write the checks. At the end, we aligned in a way that we hadn't before. And we went on to do many deals together. And we still do. And it was like, that was a big one for me, for them, for everybody involved. Everybody did really, really well. And so that was the deal that really took us to the next level, because it was a big cash inflow. And aside from that, it was just positioning and understanding, because to sell that house, you can't be just a run-of-the-mill rehabber anymore. You really do have to differentiate yourself as a builder per se. And that's when we also had all of our branding and signage. We really went, that's when my girlfriend Amanda and I aligned on our very first project. She sold it as a new construction project, not new construction, but new construction on old foundation by a premier builder. It was all about branding and positioning. And nobody wants to buy a $1.3 million home from 123 Main Street LLC and then never hear from them again. That home, we had to be DaSilva Homes. We had to show up with the logo, the branded clothing. We had to position ourselves in such a way. We had to give them the home warranty, all those things. So it was the biggest deal for a whole host of different reasons, not the least of which was the money. Obviously, we did really well on the deal, but everything else, from branding to positioning to breaking into a new market to a new price point. We had never done anything over $1 million. We went on to do a few more over a million. I wouldn't touch those in my market anymore now. So things have changed here. So we're not doing those anymore. But yeah,
That's awesome.
That was our best deal. That was our best deal.
That's amazing. I love that. I love hearing stories like that, man. So that's awesome. You know, you kind of got out of your comfort zone there. You took the leap of faith and ended up working out. So as we start to wrap the show up, let's talk about maybe a deal you did to end the show that you learned some lessons on, to say the least. You know, we'll just kind of cover it briefly. So what's a deal that you went in and it maybe wasn't a complete flop, but it was a deal that you made some mistakes on, a couple mistakes. Let's hear some of those mistakes, and then maybe the listeners can take those mistakes and have to pay the price for them.
Yeah. So I didn't know we were going to hit this one, but I'm glad we are. So we've only ever lost money on one deal.
Okay.
And it was a similar deal to the one I just described, except that it was, and so I'm almost embarrassed to say that the financing is what got me. So with the background that I have and this appetite for complex financial structures and risk and everything, I got into a poorly financed deal structure. And I was overly excited. Things were moving. The momentum had us going in the right direction. I just said, well, we just did that other monster deal. We got another one in the pipeline. Let's pick this one up too. And so we did, and we structured the financing, the LLC structure was wrong. Everything was wrong. In the end, I was essentially a GC on a project where I had very little, if any, equity. And I wound up building a beautiful home, doing what we do best, which was managing a tight rehab, running a beautiful project, turning out a beautiful project. The buyers were happy. Everybody was happy. And then at the end, we look and our pockets are turned inside out. And I said, what the hell happened here? We've been here for months. And so looking back on it now, I realized that we got ahead of ourselves, and we had gotten so comfortable modeling deals that we weren't really looking at what would a unforeseen delay with a town, something outside of our control, like a black swan, right? Like Nicholas Taleb and the whole black swan thing and what happened in 07, 08.
Yeah.
We didn't see this coming. And that's what contingencies are for. We had been kind of lulled to sleep with contingencies. We're like, we don't need those. We have our model down. We know what it costs to build these things. People who have to factor in 5-10% contingencies are never going to win bids against us because we know our numbers that well.
Yeah.
So look what, and so that lesson, we learned that lesson the hard way. We realized we can't control a zoning official going on vacation for 2 months with nobody like stepping in to review and approve plans. You would think that's impossible. That could never happen. Well, that is very possible, and that does happen. Yeah. And then on the out sales side, we had on that particular project, we hadn't taken into account what the impact of a double yellow, a busy road.
Yeah.
We don't buy on double yellows typically, but for a 650-ish house where we would build that normally, that's a $50,000 detriment to value. We'd factor that in on the front end when modeling. Well, on $1 million+ house, that's easy $100K detriment to value. Wow. The house directly behind our house, that specific project I'm talking about, sold for 1.3. We sold for 1.035.
Wow.
So that'll give you some perspective on how a busy road can impact value when you're up into the $1 million range in a town where there is a lot of inventory, where people are especially fickle. There's a lot of things. So if I had to boil it down to one lesson learned, which I probably just went through 4 or 5 there, it's
good.
Model them, be conservative with your model and really like rip your model apart. After it's done, give it to somebody else and let them pick it apart and thank them for it. Whether you agree or disagree, I put a second set of eyes on everything I do now. I model things quick just because I've done it for a long time, but now I know I'm guilty of doing things too fast. And so I'll throw it out to somebody in my circle and I'll say, hey, take a look at this. Am I way off here? Does this make sense? And be honest, like beat me up on it. If I'm off, tell me I'm off. Make me explain to you why I think this is the right way, or why these numbers should be, or why this business decision makes sense. And therein lies the value of a tight sphere, a good circle, a good mastermind. If guys are into one, or if you're not, go get one. Go be in one.
I love that. That's the Ray Dalio approach. That's a great book, Principles. He talks about, being truthful and transparent and being able to have honest feedback for people to help you get better, right? Because at the end of the day, the market's always going to win. So you got to make sure that you're, putting your best foot forward to be successful. So Gabe, we talked about a lot of stuff today. I personally learned a lot from this show. I'm sure a lot of listeners are really excited about what you shared. So if people were, interested in finding out more about you, maybe some things you got going on, what would be the best couple ways, especially if they're in the Northeast, how they can get in touch with you, kind of get into your world a little bit. So some contact information and maybe some things. I know you have some bus tours and stuff you do. It's very, very awesome to see that.
Yeah. So I think what we try and accomplish with anything we do here from an education standpoint with the events and even my ride-alongs or masterminding or anything is just like kind of getting people to think about things outside of the way that they've been taught and the structure and the construct under which they look at stuff. That's why I love this at a level thing. And it's my core competency. It's the one thing I believe we do better than most anybody else. So we're out there constantly saying, hey, this might be an option. Not this is the option, but it might be. And so I want people to always be open-minded about the opportunities that they're looking at. What's highest and best use? Can this be an ad level? Can this be a new construction project? Can I subdivide this lot? We didn't even get into that story. A missed opportunity on a lot that could have been subdivided. I put one house where I should have put two. Talk about, like, there's an expensive lesson learned, right? So I'll never not read the zoning to a T. So anyway, I think that's what we do here locally. And if anybody is local and wants to come out and see, we host these events once a quarter where we take people around. We show them 4 houses in varying stages of completion and kind of break down the find, fund, fix, flip of these heavy construction kind of style projects. But they can find me online. Any questions, I still answer all my own stuff. I'm on social, DMs, emails, everything comes direct to me, and I'm still very much accessible. So they can find me at Gabe DaSilva on whatever platform. And shoot me any questions they have with regard to anything we've talked about. I try and get back to everybody as quickly as possible, but I ultimately do get back to everyone eventually. So I know this will live on in perpetuity, and a year from now, that may be more challenging. Yeah, but right now we do, and because I can, I do, and I'm trying to seek to serve as best I can. And I would love nothing more than to find some other folks who are in markets where there aren't 20 guys like me already doing this, and have them be the first, because that's what we're talking about. It's like true legacy wealth, like just building something really, really big in a market where nobody else is doing it. That would be a hit if we could find somebody like that out there. So
I love it. So yeah, so we'll do, the social medias, we'll put in the show notes. I know you still have the YouTube page.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We'll do the YouTube in there. Well, people will be able to find you for sure, man. So Gabe, thank you so much for being a guest. That was super, super valuable. Hope you have a great day, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, brother. Thanks for having me on.